My bookshelf looks insane because they're just all sitting in front of me right now so I can grab them. Hello there, and welcome to spooky season. We have finally made it to the best time of year. If you're a mood reader like me, you know that it's time for magic schools and some spooky shit. Now I am specifically calling them magic schools because most dark academia I've read is not good. I feel like a lot of dark academia, they're so focused on tropes that they don't do like plot or character development. So if you also have that gripe, I am here to help. This is one of my favorite book series of all time. So much so that I got a tattoo of something in the book, and that is The Magicians. These are frequently billed as Harry Potter for adults, which is genuinely incorrect. Not just from the J.K. Rowling of it all, but because it's just not. They're not kids, they're college students. It's not a magic school where you're tucked away in Scotland. They're in upstate New York, and they frequently leave. And I don't know why you would call it Harry Potter for adults when they genuinely visit Narnia. Well, legally distinct from Narnia. So if that's been holding you back from reading these, please do. And if you enjoyed the TV show, the vibe is correct. Only season 1 really follows book plot, and then it goes in a completely different direction. So you can still enjoy it, and it's not completely spoiled for you. This is basically what if a gifted and talented kid actually did get accepted to a magic college after high school and learned that their favorite book series is real. I enjoy that it's college students and not teenagers. I enjoy that every character is very flawed and broken. I enjoy that characters make bad choices and have to keep going. It gets a little dark, it gets a little creepy, it goes in directions that I did not expect. Book 2 is incredible, and I will ride or die for Julia. Ninth House, which I'm currently rereading, is one of the only dark academia books I've read that was marketed as dark academia and not hot garbage. Alex Stern is a high school dropout from the seedy underbelly of LA who finds herself accepted to Yale because she can see ghosts. This book is about a secret society at Yale that manages the magic use of all the other secret societies, and it's great. Multiple timelines, we have interesting characters, we have all of the feelings of the Ivy League at fall that I've only experienced through media because I went to a state school. This was really fun, and it's just different. It's interesting. I will say I did not like Smoke and Bone, Shadow and Bone, A Blank of Blank and Blanks, her first book. I barely finished it, but you can really feel how she's gotten better as a writer in this, and it was really enjoyable. Magic for Liars was really fun because it's a magic school, but the main character is an adult who does not come from the magic world at all. Our main character, Ivy Gamble, incredible character. She's so much fun. She is a private detective whose sister can do magic and whose sister teaches at the magic school. When a murder happens, Ivy is called in to try to figure out what happened. And this is such a fun twist on the magic school because you're not seeing it as a bright-eyed child who learned that they can do magic and they're living their dream. This is a jaded adult who's always been jealous of what her sister can do. And that is such a fun, interesting take on a stale genre. 10 out of 10, I love Sarah Gailey. You will be seeing another Sarah Gailey. Saying A Deadly Education is a magic school is a stretch, but I really love these books and I want to recommend them. As in many magic school books, the children who are magical are in danger, so they're put into a school for their safety. But what if that magic school was put in a pocket dimension that the adults didn't really check on anymore, and the monsters you're supposed to fight in your final have taken over the entire school? That is A Deadly Education. Now, a lot of children do die at the school, so the adults on the outside know what's going on, and they know there are problems. If you're thinking, what sort of society would not just, take a year off to fix the magic school? Why are we in this situation? Don't worry, that comes up in later books. I love fictional politics. I like real world politics, but it's a lot more fun when it's not real and taking away my actual rights. So if you want what kind of comes out to be a commentary on both politics and magic schools, 10 out of 10. I can't really make a dark academia video and not talk about the Atlas Six. What if the Library of Alexandria secretly still continued, and every decade they took on 6 new initiates, knowing that only one would move on to be a librarian? On its face, this sounds great. Man, who doesn't love a secret library? But I feel like the writer reached beyond her grasp on this one. I liked the setup, I kind of liked the characters, I was ready to go on the plot adventure, but they all kind of stall out. I know this was self-published at first. I have no idea if I got the edited version or not. There weren't any glaring, grammatical mistakes. I didn't get lost in run-on sentences, but it still felt like it could use a content edit. I felt like I was reading the next to last draft. I would classify this as sleepy time reading. I have this terrible condition where I have to read a book to fall asleep. If it's too good, then I don't fall asleep. If it's too bad, then I also can't fall asleep. So I would give this a solid mediocre. I know there's more in the series. Apparently they get better. I have not cared to find out. Now for the classics, starting with Frankenstein, my beloved. This is one of my favorite books, you guys. I read it for the first time when I was like 13. Changed my life. Can't recommend it more. It's not scary except for like the depths of human cruelty, but it is perfect for spooky season. If you like Prometheus and Alien Covenant, you will devour this book. Those movies are, in my mind, more Frankenstein movies than Alien movies, and I refuse to elaborate. You can't go wrong with Edgar Allan Poe. It's classics for a reason. Spooky, creepy, ambiance, sad love stories, Maryland. You know what you're getting with Edgar Allan Poe already. H.P. Lovecraft, one of the best examples of a deeply, deeply flawed person writing genre-changing literature. I'm not the biggest Lovecraft fan, but Mr. Gremlin is, and he's been recommending some short stories for me to read. If you don't really like the way Lovecraft writes, there is good news, because he let his friends use his characters. So The King in Yellow is my husband's personal favorite Lovecraft story. What I love about H.P. Lovecraft is while Cthulhu and cosmic horror have deeply ingrained themselves in pop culture, the stories themselves haven't. So unless you've watched a bunch of adaptations, then you don't really know what's gonna happen. And they're really fun. I really enjoy these. They haven't all aged very well, but they're still very fun to read. So if you like Monster of the Week shows, you should read the Mercy Thompson books. This isn't even all of them, you guys. This is the ultimate don't judge a book by its cover, because Mercy Thompson would hate that this is her book cover. I think it was just like a gimmick from when they came out. They do get better as time goes on, so just pretend that this is like not what it is. Mercy Thompson was raised in a werewolf pack. She is a rough and tumble girl who works full-time as a VW mechanic. But she does not fall into the traps that you think she would. She's not a pick-me. She's not like other girls. She's a girl's girl through and through, and we love her for it. She is a loner because she's not part of the wolf packs, because she can't turn into a wolf. She can turn into a coyote at will, and she doesn't know why. We do eventually find out why. I'm not going to spoil it. Growing up in a werewolf pack, she knows that other supernatural beings do exist. We have the Fae, that are a very Germanic fairy tale, real kind of Fae. I mean, not real, but real world lore, which I really appreciate. They're not just like Akatar with wings and whatever. I'm sorry, I hate Akatar. Now's the time to tell you. Now, what makes this a monster of a week is that there's a different big bad of sorts every book. Sometimes it's a vampire, sometimes it's ghosts. There's always something coming up that needs to be solved. The other thing I love about this is it's urban fantasy that isn't romantasy. There is a romantic subplot. Yes, her next door neighbor is a super hot alpha werewolf that she hates. And yes, we do get a little bit of enemies to lovers as the book stories goes on. But it's not the main point, and it's not smut. I'm not judging if you like smut. It's just not what I come to read a novel for. I read these in public, you guys. I go to coffee shops a lot. I cannot be reading that in public. No, thank you. The characters have real relationships, romantic or not. I really enjoy the way Patricia Briggs handles werewolf hierarchies, because they're bullshit and they're not even real in real life. That's not how real wolves act in the wild. That study was done on a captive wolf family, not a pack of wolves in the wild. I digress. I could go off on that tangent for a while. These are also very bite-sized, very bingeable. If you are in a reading slump, these are fantastic. I would say these are better than Sleepy Time mid books, because I have stayed up all night reading them, and they do get better as time goes on. What happens in book 1 creates complications in book 2, creates complications in book 3, which I really enjoy. I will say to check the trigger warnings for the series before you start. It is only one scene in one book, but she does deal with it and recover from it for quite a long time. So if that's not something that you are here for, I completely understand. We move now into horror comedy. Some say the best movie genre. I cannot talk about horror comedy and not recommend Grady Hendrix. Grady Hendrix really proves that horror and comedy are two sides of the same coin. The tension, the build-up, the release, and he is the expert of both. Now, he has written a few more books, but these are my recommendations. If you find yourself thinking this looks like an IKEA catalog, you are correct, because the entire story takes place in Legally Distinct from an IKEA. It even has interstitials of things you could buy, and it is the dimensions of an IKEA catalog, which I know because I love IKEA. Fucking love IKEA, man. If you have worked retail, you will enjoy this book. The employees of Legally Distinct from IKEA keep arriving in the morning to find items broken, so a few of them volunteer to stay overnight and see what happens. And boy, does stuff happen. I don't want to give any of the plot away from this because it's a quick, fun read. It's not really, like, scary, but it is such buddy horror comedy vibes, and it would make a really fun movie. How to Sell a Haunted House is his newest book. I think he has one coming out very shortly, so depending on when you're watching this, there might be a new one. I love this book. This book got me. This book got me so good that I had to put it down, and I couldn't pick it back up again for a couple months. The plot of this book is about a woman having to leave her husband and child behind to briefly move back home, to go through her parents' house after they died, to clear it out and sell it and fight off her ne'er-do-well brother who just wants to keep the house. But what this book is really about is what happens when you put yourself into your art. Her mom was a puppeteer, so the house is full of puppets. And dear listener, I don't like puppets. I love a Muppet, don't get me wrong, but like marionettes kind of creep me out. Like dolls. Dolls are really creepy. This came out while I was packing up to move out of state. Mr. Gremlin had already come out here to Oregon, so I was by myself with our dog in an increasingly empty house in the suburbs alone, which on its own isn't that scary. It was a suburb of Austin. I knew I was safe. But this book is also about packing up a house that's full of terrifying puppets making scary sounds. That was not good for me. This got me in a way I have not gotten got before. I had to put it down for a while. I had to wait until I had not only moved out here to Oregon, but I was completely unpacked and there were no more half-empty boxes around. Your mileage may vary on it actually being scary, but this just hit a lot of my buttons at once, and it was really bad, but good, but bad. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires is my favorite Grady Hendrix book, but it is technically a sequel, so we're gonna start with My Best Friend's Exorcism. This is so much fun. This is a love letter to 80s horror, as you can tell by the VHS style cover. I love how much theming he and the publisher get to do with these. It really makes it so much fun. When high school sophomores Abby and Gretchen go swimming in the lake at the end of summer, Abby is fine, but Gretchen is different. She's mean, she's irritable, she's acting very strange. Now, of course, the adults just think she's being a delinquent and starting to use drugs, so no one can help her but Abby. And Abby has to ask, is our friendship stronger than the devil? This is just such a fun read. I devoured it. I laughed so hard while reading it. It's exactly what it says on the cover. Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires is also exactly what's on the cover. Now, it's a little bit of a sequel because the main characters are the parents of that friend group a few years after that book happened. I wouldn't say that you get spoilers if you read this first, but it does just make a little bit more sense because they're calling back to things that already happened. This is just such a fun book about bored stay-at-home moms. Our main character's husband is always at work, her kids are teenagers who don't need her anymore. All she has is her book club that loves true crime, until an interesting man comes to town and takes an interest in them. This book is bonkers. It's so fun. It goes so hard. I love all of the characters so deeply. I have heard people say that they hate this book because Grady Hendrix hates women. That was extra funny to me because I thought Grady Hendrix was a woman until I followed him on Twitter. There's a real difference between writing women who were bad people and hating women. I think it just goes to show how realistic his characters are when he's just writing flawed characters. Not every character needs to be good. Most characters shouldn't be good. That's very boring. Writers are not endorsing what they write. They're telling you a story. It's very different. I love haunted houses. I don't know if it's because I grew up in one. I went to a state school that was a former mental institution and many people said it was haunted. I love what they represent. I'm a haunted house girly, which means that, of course, I love The Shining. This is one of my favorite books. I think this is like the great American novel, and I'm not exaggerating. If you think you know what this is about, but you haven't actually read the book, then you only know the plot, you don't know what it's actually about. The plot, as I'm sure we all know, is a couple with a young kid move to a hotel in Colorado to ride out the winter and take care of the property. The dad goes through some stuff, becomes a psychopath, and tries to kill them. The book is really about, like many Stephen King novels, is addiction, and a terrible force trying to bring out the worst in the humans involved. This book has so much nuance that you don't have in the movie. I would say the biggest difference is that Jack isn't just a flat psychopath. You get flashbacks into his past to see how he got here. You get to watch the hotel put its feelers into him and change him. This is a story about addiction, how it changes you, what it does to those around you, and what you can do when you realize you need to change. This also has my favorite Chekhov's gun of all time, which is topiary animals, and if you want to know more, you're gonna have to read it. Just like home. This book is about Vera, who has to go back to her childhood home, deal with her complicated feelings about her father, and her dying mother. An artist has moved into the back house and is physically stripping the house away to make art. And Vera's finding notes in her father's handwriting scattered around the house. This is so readable. I think I read it in 2 sittings. I love Sarah Gailey's writing style. I felt like I was there experiencing this through Vera's eyes the whole time. There is something on the back of the book that I did not read. So you're supposed to go in knowing, and it wound up being a huge twist to me, which I thought was a lot more fun that way. The twisted ones. This was my first and not my last T. Kingfisher. This was again very bingeable. I could not put it down. Mouse's grandmother died alone because she was a terrible person that no one liked. Mouse's dad asks her to go clean out the house because no one else can. So she packs up the dog, who does not die. T. Kingfisher is a real one and tells us on like page 2 that the dog is fine. Thank God. Packs up, heads to Appalachia to clean out the house. She finds her step-grandfather's handwritten journals about some weird things happening in the woods around the house. While she knows better than to go looking for trouble, she can't help but find it in the woods, and things go left from there. This is interesting. It's very well written. I did hate the ending, but I feel like the journey to get there was enough that I will forgive the ending and still recommend it. If you like slashers, read the Indian Lake trilogy. I just don't have the 3rd book yet, so pretend that I do. I don't love slashers, and I still love these books, which is a testament how good they are, and the magic of Stephen Graham Jones. Jade Daniels is a high school senior who is obsessed with 80s horror movies, probably because she lives across the lake from Camp Blood, the site of a massacre 50 years ago. Nothing happens in the small poor town of Proof Rock, Idaho, until a bunch of millionaires buy that island to build their luxury houses on. Since Jade knows horror movies, she knows this is going to awaken something and that one of these rich girls has to be the final girl. Can she find them, train them, and keep them alive throughout what happens? Jade Daniels is an incredible main character who could have gone so wrong, but Stephen Graham Jones writes incredible women. Someone actually asked him on Twitter, and I think he said it was because his wife keeps him in line and he knows and respects women. So his female characters are incredible. This is so much fun. I find slasher movies kind of boring, but this turns the concept on its head in a way that's so interesting. This feels like a great final ending, but he continues it in an interesting way in the 2nd book. We're not just rehashing the same ground, it's a continuation of what happens when spoilers from book 1 happens to you and your town. I will be picking up the 3rd book. Okay, we're getting into actually kind of scary books now, with vampires. And vampires can only mean one thing. Guillermo del Toro's The Strain. This book has everything. We have vampirism is a scientific disease. We have what if Marilyn Manson became a vampire? We've got Nazi hunting. Yes, Nazi hunting. It's incredible. I love that our main character works for the CDC, so we're tackling this through the eyes of someone scientifically literate who doesn't believe. I now also understand if you don't want to stare at this cover the whole time, I will be putting the book down. It does set the tone though. This is dark. This is gritty. I think my favorite thing about these books is that the good guys don't always win. You reach a point in one of the books where it's almost over and you think, wow, I don't know how the tide can turn on this and the good guys can come away unscathed. And they don't. And that's great. You can't have a horror book without stakes. That's a terrible pun that I did not intend. I'm so sorry. This is the epitome of flawed characters having flawed stories. This is horror. This is scary. This is body horror. This is gore. This is psychologically scary. This is Guillermo del Toro at, I think, his best. I just want to crawl into Guillermo del Toro's brain and spend some time there because that man is incredible. The characters also have heart and depth, and you care about them. You care so deeply about these characters. Also Nazi hunting, which is more satisfying now politically than when these books came out, but I'm always good for some good Nazi hunting. And killing. Don't forget the killing. The killing's very important. Ghost stories. I love ghost stories, not just because ghosts are fun, but because they're a really interesting vehicle to tell stories. If you like Alan Wake and Control, you need to read Hex. Hex is about a small picturesque town in the Hudson Valley where if you're born there, you can't leave, and if you move there, you're stuck. The town has a 300-year-old ghost, as is seen on the cover, haunting them. But it's not a normal kind of haunting because she's just always there, so everyone is just used to her. They have the protocol. There's even an app for logging where you sighted her. She doesn't hurt you, she doesn't interact with anyone, she just is there. The town's teens are sick of dealing with the regulations and decide to make it go viral on YouTube, which is a bad idea. This book is so different than any other book, probably because he's a European writer. It has that irreverent humor that you find in Alan Wake and Control. Like, the second time you see the ghost in the book, the people put a dishcloth on her head so it doesn't feel like she's staring at them. You jump POV a lot, which I really enjoy. You kind of get like a Stephen King It vibe in that you get to know a lot of the people in the town. You see through the eyes of the teenagers, you see through the eyes of the adults, the people who work to keep the secret hidden and keep the town together. You get a really cohesive story that just goes off the rails. It's very silly, funny, and then very scary vibes. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. This last section is books that define a genre, but I can't not recommend them. We're starting with Paul Tremblay's A Head Full of Ghosts because it's so unique. I think this really hit with me because I was in high school at the height of reality TV, so it really struck a chord with me. The story is about a family where the oldest daughter has schizophrenia, but they can't afford the doctors who would help her. The father brings in a Catholic priest who says that she's being possessed, and he knows a production company who would pay really well to document what happens. I love the ambiguity that you don't really know if she's having a schizophrenic episode or if she is possessed from scene to scene. I love that you see a lot of this through the eyes of an 8-year-old. It's a thing that, again, Stephen King does where you capture the terror of childhood so well. As an adult, you don't really remember how scary the dark is or not understanding what the grown-ups are talking about, but this captures that in a really terrifying way. I absolutely devoured this. Pet Sematary is another classic for a reason. I'm not even going to give you a plot summary because we all know what happens, but it's incredible. This is one of the only books that I've thrown across the room. Well, not this copy, the trade paperback that I read for the first time. I had to put it down. I yelled at it. I would look at it and say, there's no way that we're doing this. We can't do that. And yes, they did, and yes, they do, and you can't stop them. The tension and the dread you feel in this book, even and sometimes because you know what's going to happen, is unmatched. This makes my tummy hurt like watching Longlegs does. I've reread this book so many times and it hits every single time. Even if you've seen the movies, I do recommend this, if only because the ending is very different and much better. Such Sharp Teeth is so much fun, and I'm going to pick up every Rachel Harrison book because of it. Rory moves back to her small hometown, even though she doesn't really want to, because her twin sister is pregnant and about to give birth, and the dad skipped town. Unfortunately, things get a little complicated when she gets mauled by what seems like a wolf and has some complications. It's body horror, but what I really found scary is that this is 100% a story about the terrors of pregnancy. I am terrified of being pregnant, I am very child-free, and this got me. This doesn't have a ton of plot, but I would say that the vibe and the characters and the allegory carry it, even though not a whole lot actually happens. If you read one book from this video, read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Now, I don't want to ruin the plot because it is extremely integral to the story, but this is an incredible story of revenge. This is a good for her story if I've ever read one. The body horror is exquisite. I had to put the book down and just stare into the middle distance for a while because it really got me. I love Stephen Graham Jones because he gives you a horror setup. We enter the scene. What you expect to happen happens, but he doesn't stop where most people do. He keeps going. You live in that scene. There is nothing for you outside of the scene, and you are stuck until he says you're done. And it is incredible. I got goosebumps. I got nauseous. My tummy hurt. This is one of the best horror books I've ever read, and truly one of the only ones that actually scared me. Gideon the Ninth. Now, these aren't really scary. They're not really horror, but I find myself rereading them every autumn. This book doesn't make sense. I read this book 3 times and I only barely understand it more than I did the first time, but it's fun. These are the most fun, irreverent characters that you will ever encounter. And when something happens to them, you care about them very deeply. I love Gideon. I love Harrow. I love every character. And this book has everything. It has lesbians, it has space travel, it has God question mark, it has science puzzles, it has enemies to bigger enemies to lovers question mark. This has the feeling of being hard science fiction, but it's not really hard science fiction. It's like incomprehensible magic in space. But it's worth it, and the more you read the books, the more they make sense. I actually may love the sequel Harrow the Ninth a little bit more because it is once again impenetrable and does not make sense, but in a completely different way. This book is kind of about meeting God, what happens when you have so much power that nothing can stop you. It's beautiful, it's heart-wrenching, it makes no sense. It has a coffee shop AU. The third book, Nona the Ninth, is my least favorite so far, but probably because it won't really make sense until the fourth book comes out. The more of these books that you read, the more the previous ones make sense, and the more you reread them in order, the more the entire story makes sense. This is kind of like The Dark Tower, you just gotta commit to it. If you need another recommendation, every time I have bought one of these, the booksellers got excited. I read Gideon the Ninth when Harrow came out, and read the entirety of Harrow on my phone in the Libby app because I do not have a Kindle yet. The Library at Mount Char isn't really a horror book, but it is a horror book. It's a little bit magic school, but it's not a magic school. This book doesn't just defy genre, it defies plot description. Carolyn grew up with her siblings in a locked house and frequently in a locked room. Her siblings aren't really her siblings. Her dad isn't really her dad, and he might be God, like a god or the god. I can't tell you more. I'm very unfortunately can't. It has body horror. It grossed me out. If it is a content warning, it happens in this book, and it will blindside you whether you know it's coming or not. It's funny. It's scary, it's weird, you don't always know what's happening. I really want to reread it and see what that will bring to me. If you liked Gideon the Ninth, or especially Harrow the Ninth, you should read this and thank me later. If you've made it all the way to the end, thank you for watching my first booktube video. I hope it wasn't too terrible. We will see how this goes in editing. If you have a horror or spooky season book that you recommend that I didn't mention, please let me know in the comments. I'm always looking for more book recommendations. Or if you read something that I mentioned, please tell me how you liked it. I would prefer that you did like it, but if you didn't, you can also let me know that you did not like it. Not every book is for every person. I'm looking forward to making more of these, like monthly wrap-ups, genre-specific things. I have a bajillion urban fantasy books that I'm dying to talk about. I'm also elsewhere on the internet. You may have found me from TikTok, where I talk about books, or on Instagram, where I design cross-stitch patterns. I know that's very different, but it's very hard to make content about cross-stitch that is not mind-numbingly boring. So we're branching out. Okay, I love you, bye.